Just some guy talking here, and this might not be the right time for this message for you. I want to say that up front. So if it's not, maybe you can just save it and come back to this later, but I want to record this anyway. There are a lot of people celebrating today, and there are a lot of people who are not. We voted at historic levels in this election. Both candidates received more votes than any candidate in any presidential election in our history. And as I've said before, that can only be a great thing for our country moving forward. But when the celebrations die down and some of the wounds and frustrations are not as raw for both sides, there will still be a lot of work for us to do in this country to move forward and continue to be better. And I want to provide my perspective on a conversation that I expect to hear a lot more of. And that is this frustration that a lot of people have with how many people voted for the opposing candidate, and what that says about the deep, deep divisions in our country. And this is my perspective. I grew up in a border town on the California border with Mexico, so on the United States side. You could literally walk to the fence from my house in a matter of minutes. It was just a few blocks away. And my community was very, very, very much dependent on its interactions with its sister community on the other side of the border in Mexico. We, as young people, we went to Mexico to party. There was a lot of different kinds of shopping that we did in Mexico. We had family and friends on the other side of the fence, and vice versa. People from Mexico came to the United States, to our town, to shop and do other things. There were a lot of ways in which that community was symbiotic. Now, if you pressed uh, people on either side of the border to make a choice and say which side they stood for, most of the people on our side of the border would claim the United States, and most of the people on the other side of the border in Mexico would claim Mexico. Um, there was a very clear delineation between the countries. Obviously, there's a fence that runs between us, but by and large, day to day, that fence had very little to do with what our relationship was with the sister city. In fact, in a lot of ways, I personally had more of a relationship, more of an attachment, more of a connection to the people who were just across the fence in Mexico than I did to people who were much deeper into the United States. The closest city in my childhood was the Mexican city across the border. The closest large U.S. city was a couple hours away, a couple hundred miles away. And I think about that right now because of this idea of this hard line, this deep division between red and blue, Republican, Democrat, blue states, red states, this candidate or the other candidate and who voted for whom. Um, because I it gives me hope. It gives me hope that there is a an ability to have a connection with a group of people who are just on the other side of a barrier that seems imposing and seems hard and fast. And I want to say this, and like I said, it might not be the right time for people to hear this, but I want to put this out there. There are people on either side of this division that we will hear so much about, that we have heard so much about, who are much more like us, who share much more with us than some people who are much deeper and further to the fringes of the political groups that we align ourselves with. And that should give us all hope. It doesn't mean that it doesn't take work. It doesn't mean that it's going to be easy. It doesn't mean that aren't obstacles, language obstacles, cultural obstacles, loyalty obstacles like the ones that I grew up being very, very familiar with from a one country to another perspective. But we are all in one country. We are all in one United States. And I encourage you that once you're done celebrating, once you're done grieving, that you look across that line and find those people with whom you have um, connections that are not impacted by this line in the sand that we uh, draw, in some ways, very subjectively between one American and another. That doesn't mean that you are going to like everybody on the other side. That doesn't mean if there are very real grievances that you should just let those go. That does not mean that if somebody on the other side acts like an a-hole, that you should just let that slide in the spirit of unity. But the people who are making the effort to coexist despite this barrier, this invisible barrier in most senses, between us should be given some grace. And I would hope that those people who are just across the line um, on the other side would give you that grace as well. That's the way forward. That's the way we move from this place that we've been in to the place where we want to be, where we all should want to be. Um, we want to be able to eliminate these barriers. We want to be able to coexist as a country, as human beings. And I encourage you to find ways to do that. Like I said before, celebrate if you have reason to celebrate, grieve if you have reason to grieve. And when you're done with that, when the dust settles, find ways to, if not join the other person's side or the other side's side, to coexist as people or as members, as citizens of the same wonderful country that we have the privilege and luxury to live in. I'm just some guy talking, and I will talk to you next time.